I'll teach all that. What folder is it in? Do you remember?
The link is like almost up there. It's in Slack already.
Oh yeah,
so.
just repost it.
Repost it, yeah.
And then invoke in that channel.
Sure.
It's in my head this time.
Absolutely crazy.
Is it
Is it
broken?
not showing it?
Oh, maybe it's my fault. Might be my fault. Mirror. Or not.
So like you're plugged into this. That's on there. Actually. You want to change your slide real quick and see what happens? So, okay, first.
No.
Sorry, it was mislabeled, the inputs,
Oh.
so.
If I forget, I think it is. I will. Just what I'm doing.
Oh yeah. Okay. I'll try.
It's fine. I don't think anyone cares.
Okay. All right. Welcome everybody. Do the attendance link if you can. It's probably kind of small, but this Sunday at 4 to 8 p.m. we have Cyber Conquest, that attack and defense competition we talked about probably a couple weeks ago. Signups for that are open. I think Mike just posted in Slack again the link to sign up. You guys can pick your own teams, or you can sign up as an individual, and we'll try to find a team for you guys. If you have any questions about that, you can hit us up after the meeting, and we'll try to answer any questions that you might have. So for the mock debrief, we're going to start by talking a bit about dealing with remote systems. So a big thing in this for this mock was just getting you guys more familiar with dealing with your remote systems, giving you that little bit of danger with being able to lock yourselves out. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to actually keep yourself in a system once you're in, and not accidentally killing your own sessions. So right now I'm on webmail on the Team1V app. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH into a remote system. I'm going to go 10.100.1.40, that's the info portal system. And I am blocked. I might have done that to myself. Oh, I was already SSH'd in. That was the problem. Net reflection. Okay, so I'm going to SSH in from webmail into the info portal system. And so what we basically want to do here, like we would on any other system, is we want to firewall off everything that we don't need, and then we want to restrict external access. So a big thing with remote systems is that you have to actually keep access for yourself. So you need to have SSH open, or you might need to have RDP open on Windows. So that leads to issues where you want to have SSH open for you, but not for Red Team. So one cool way to do this is by editing the SSHD config. There is a directive called allow users, where you can specify I only want to allow this user to log in, and I can also specify I only want to allow them to log in from a certain IP address or a certain network. So I might go 10.0.1.0/24. So basically what this will do, I'll scroll in a little bit for you, is this will only allow root to log in and only from that 10.0.1.0/24 network. So if Red Team tries to log in using any user from an IP address that's not in that network, they won't be able to get in. And if anyone tries to log in as anybody other than root, they won't be able to log in. And obviously, if you want to change this around so you use like a non-privileged user with sudo or something like that, you can do that too. Yes?
Just to clarify, everything is etc SSH SSHD config.
Yeah, etc SSH SSHD config. Once you do that, you would do a service SSHD restart. And then if we swap over to another terminal, and we try to log in again, should be able to log in. There we go. And then if we try to log in as someone other than root, you should get a permission denied. Just to double check. And then also if you try to log in as root from some other IP other than like that network, it's not going to work either. So that's a really easy way to restrict SSH access. Something you have to be very careful of when you're messing with the SSHD config is that if you restart SSH and you did something wrong in the config, it might not restart. In which case, you will have an open session, but if you log out, you won't be able to get back in because this SSH isn't actually running. So let's say I typoed this, and I forgot this R. And I tried to restart SSH. Luckily on this CentOS system, it'll tell me that SSH didn't restart properly. Depending on the system you're running, it might not actually tell you that the service failed to restart. It might just give you no output, which is kind of bad. So what you want to do after you restart SSH is to like check that it's actually running. So you can do an LSOF NPI, which I can see that I only have one SSHD process, and that's my current connection. That's my current session. It's not actually listening on anything. Another way to do that would be netstat. I believe we like plunt, which will do that, and we can see there's no SSH process here. So what will happen is if I disconnect from this session, I won't be able to get back into the system, and I'm completely locked out, basically. So you should want to make sure you check that stuff before you actually try to like log out or leave it and work on other things. A good way to do that is to just, whenever you change something that's like critical like this, is to try to SSH in again using some other system, or to like switch to a different terminal and try it, just so that you can double check that you haven't locked yourself out. Similarly, you have to be very, very careful with firewall rules. If I just do an iptables-p input drop, like I might want to do on a local system, my connection is just going to die. So what you really want to do here is to make sure that you have your established and related rules in here first before you actually do that drop. So now you can see I've put in that drop rule, but I'm still connected. This is kind of like what I showed you when you accidentally kill SSH. So I have a current session running, but if I log out right now and I try to log back in, I'm not gonna be able to do it because I'm actually still blocking SSH inbound. So this is sort of like if you had just killed that SSH session. So your current session is active, but you're in a very sort of precarious state. So you gotta make sure to allow in SSH from your network again, like we did through the SSH config. Like that. I'm actually on Info Portal right now. And we can see we can still log in like that. I believe that's it for that. Does anyone have any questions on like being careful on like not locking yourself out of remote stuff on Linux side anyway? Cool. So now I'm going to move on to the Info Portal. So this is a custom PHP web app that I made for this, just to give Red Team a little bit of fun. So it basically consists of two main PHP files. We got info.php and admin.php. So basically what info.php does, if I jump over to a box with a GUI, should work. Actually, I'm not allowing HTTP in. Okay, so basically the idea behind this was that you would like have someone come in here and they want to look up the reservation information. So they stick their last name in here, like Johnson. They put in a reservation number, like 1. They hit submit. And then eventually it would go into the database on the Hotel Druid. It would pull out some of their room information. So it grabbed the room number, it grabbed the room code that they'd use to like hit in like a keypad, and then they'd like show their stay information. Pretty simple stuff. This is basically what the scoring engine was checking, was they would just go to this URL every time and try to like check on some reservation information. But if we go into the home page and view source, we see there is a hidden admin.php page, which we can go to. This is like a little simple CTF type thing, where on this page we have a client-side validation of the password, which is in here. And basically what that did, it would just XOR the current character with the character before it, and they would base64 encode it to check the password. So that was like a super simple CTF type thing for Red Team. But once they got in, they were able to run any command they want on the system as the web user. So they're running as Apache, they can run any command as Apache. And then also, they can run any database command, like that. And by default, the config.php was using the root user on the MySQL database, so they could have just done anything they wanted in here. So obviously, not a good thing to have running on your system. Fairly simple to find, and then especially on the running arbitrary commands, part that's in the web application checklist, just disabling all those PHP functions. I believe this used like pass-through or system or something like that. That was just a fun little thing that we threw in this time. So going on from here, we're going to have Mike talk a little bit about fail to ban.
Oh, Joey, it's not. Gotta love it when it doesn't duplicate properly. No? Oh, Joy, I gotta go all the way around again. Now I don't have a display, now it doesn't have a display, and so on. Okay, back to where I was. Okay. Awesome. So, for one of your injects, you guys had to set up IP address blocking on FTP. I think one group did try to do something else in the config file. In general, there isn't anything built into SSH that's going to allow you to do blocking on an IP basis. But there's nothing like that built into SSH itself because it has to manage the firewall to do IP blocking. In general, what probably would have gotten you most of the way there is literally just apt install fail2ban. Fail2ban is what we normally use for IP blocking. There's probably some other ways to do it. Thank you, VApp, for freezing on me. There we go. Awesome. There's probably some other ways to do it. Fail2ban is normally the way we've always done it. It is, I believe, either referenced by the SSH checklist or in the SSH checklist. Majority of the work for Fail2ban, as I said, is just installing it. Once you get it, I believe there was some parameters. I don't remember if they were different than the Fail2ban defaults, but if you just go to etc Fail2ban, and that's the main directory, it's gonna, oh, yay. And just look at some main configuration files. I'm kind of gonna explain more or less how to set it up. Some general stuff in here. We have log levels. We don't care about any of that. Log targets. Once again, we don't care about any of that. Sockets, PID files. We don't care about any of that. We do care about. Normally, I'm gonna set that as an alias sometime. So we just go here. This is really what we care about. So Fail2ban isn't actually specific to SSH by any means. All Fail2ban really does, and the way it works, is it parses various log files, and then based on those log files, it does regex to see whether there was an auth failure, and if there was an auth failure from what IP address, and then using that, it will start spinning up IP tables rules, or I don't know if it supports other firewalls or not, but it'll spin up firewall rules to block those addresses. So you can set up Fail2ban for pretty much any service. It's only by default set up for, I think if you just install it, it does do some detection. I don't think a ton. So it will block, it'll block, it'll work for most stuff. The issue with setting up Fail2ban for a lot of stuff is that your logs for those services are not great. Fail2ban really needs authentication failures to have the IP address it came from on that particular line, and the log really needs to be all in one line for it to work properly. If that's not the case, you have a hard time setting it with Fail2ban. But back to kind of what the inject was having you do. I don't know, does anybody remember what the parameters were for the inject for that one?
It was like if there were 6 attempts to log in.
Yep.
If you spent 5 minutes, you banned them.
And that's exactly what you get here. So the find time would have been specified exactly how long. By default, it's set to 6, and these are all, those are seconds. So that'd be 600 seconds. Ban time is how long it's banned for, and the max retry is right here. So all you needed to do was install Fail2ban, go to this one file, jo.conf, edit it a little bit, and then just restart it. Probably would have gotten you the inject without any problems. Okay, right there. So do a little bit of simple math, modify your find time, ban time, and max retry, and you're good to go. Fail2ban does run as a service, although I don't know if that's going to work or not, because do I have systemd? I do. So all you would have had to do is edit the jail file and then restart the service. It also does do some logging too, which might be helpful. Let's see here. Actually, yeah. And once again, more parameters in there. I believe it does. Actually, let me check here. It might be in the jails. I don't remember. No, okay. So as far as I'm aware, depending on what you specify, that's where it's going to log for failed to ban. Any questions about failed to ban in general for that inject? How you would have done stuff? Okay. That's in the, as I said, that's in the SSH checklist. Not too bad to set up. The other thing I was going to talk about briefly was services. So we got the question of how do you know whether a service is malicious or not, and what do you do, and all that stuff. Mostly for on this box, I believe the question was relating to VNC, which is running. Normally, what it boils down to, in a lot of ways, is we don't care whether it's malicious or not. If it's a malicious process editing something in the system, well, that is something we need to take care of at some point or another. But if we're talking about services for like remote management, whether that's there or not, normally we're just going to block in the firewall level anyway, is what it boils down to. So for example, if you guys check here, and that was netstat-plunt, I know we were having a fun time with our netstat flags. Oh. And this one does generate quite a bit of output. So if we look at our addresses here, and so if you notice here, we have, what are we running here? We have something binding to port, so 0.0.0 means it's going to bind to all interfaces. So that's going to be anything. That's loopback, so we don't care about loopback because they already have to be on our system to access loopback at all. So we have 22, so where we have SSH open. We have 445, which 445 and 139 is kind of a sign that we're running SMB, which if we're running SMB, that's not great. We should probably stop that. But if we stop it at the firewall level, it doesn't really matter, so just firewall it off. Same thing goes here. We have port 5900 open, which, as some people figured out, was X11 VNC, which that one actually is problematic because the way X11 VNC was set up on the system and will probably continue to be set up is it has absolutely zero authentication whatsoever. So I don't know. Did Red Team actually take advantage of that any? Did they have fun with that? Chris did? Okay. Yeah, you can literally log in to VNC and just, I'm sure Red Team just looked at your screens for a very long time and saw you guys do password changes and then just recorded those.
Yeah, we did on Team 1. We watched 90 bucks for most of the competition.
So in general, if you have a service like that and it's making network connections, that's a time to make sure it's blocked in your firewall, more or less. In general, you can kill it, and that's not normally a problem. The worst thing killing services is mostly going to do is might cause your system to have a kernel panic, and now you get to reboot the box. So that's probably the worst case scenario in general, is killing any process in memory means you have to reboot. It shouldn't, as far as I'm aware, Nick can correct me if it's wrong, it probably shouldn't break a process for the most part. There is a couple that are probably not quite as resilient. For example, if you break apt mid while it's running, you might have problems with that, but for the most part, you're pretty safe. But just don't go willy-nilly and killing processes because there's really no reason to do that. If you guys find evidence that, oh, my IP tables is getting flushed like every 3 seconds, that's when you start looking for those malicious processes and how they're persisting, because that's when it becomes a problem. Unless Nick disagrees with me on that one. No, okay. For services in general, and something else you can check. Let's see if that, I don't remember if that prints to a pager or not. It did not. Great. Thanks. So if you do service status all and you guys just look at the services in general, that's kind of a good guess. Red Team, if Red Team's going to do something, they're not going to set up a service for it. They might. It's very unlikely. They're probably not going to take the time to set up a service. Normally, I think they have better ways of persisting. But if you guys check and you see something fishy and it's not running as a service, it might be something, but it doesn't mean necessary very much, unfortunately. But as I said, network connections is really what I want to go for. Any questions on that? Okay. Nick?
Check your firewall quick. I tried to brute force it.
You tried to brute force what?
I tried to brute force SSH.
Okay.
There we go.
Yep. Okay, and that's something. So fail2ban S said modifies your IP tables rules directly. So that's all it does is basically this little rule right here. It set that up in response to him failing to log in X number of tries. So now we're just blocking that IP address. It, of course, will go away after a while because that's the whole point of fail to ban. You don't want to ban it permanently. You can modify the rules directly. That's a bad. I don't think that probably won't hurt anything. Probably not a good idea. It has its own CLI built into fail to ban that you can try to figure out how to use. Normally, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. There's like 2 commands that actually matter. Unfortunately, I don't remember them at all. It's probably like fail to ban client unban. Nope, I don't remember. Okay. But you guys can look at fail to ban more if you want to. It's a nice thing to set up. It's not going to stop Red Team. It might slow them down a little bit because they're going to start banning their IP addresses. And if they have automated scripts, that is when it might be more helpful because it'll ban their scripting server. Because if they're trying to hit 10 passwords or 20 passwords every so often, then they might actually manage to ban themselves. Just be careful not to ban the scoring engine out because that's going to be your biggest issue is if you set up fail to ban and you ban the scoring engine, well, now the service is down. You probably don't know why the service is down because you don't necessarily know the scoring IP address, so it's going to make life hard for you. So if you have fail to ban running and the service went down, but everything appears to be working, I can access it fine, well, I'd clear your fail to ban bans and just see, or you can just stop the service entirely and it'll take the IP tables rules with it and just see if the service comes back.
Is there something similar for Windows, or will fail to ban also work?
No.
I believe we had an inject like that at Nationals last year, and there was like a really amazingly bad VB script that they tried to install.
Yeah, and I think the VB script basically did the same exact thing, which was let's check the logs, and then when we have X number of authentication attempts, we're gonna block it on Windows Firewall. You could write that. I don't think they'd let you have it in Nationals, but yeah, that was we had because they installed OpenSSH on Windows for Nationals, but that was before we had nice OpenSSH on Windows. That was before that whole thing. Yeah. So, okay. Nick, where do you want to go from here? Just general questions, or?
Yeah. Does anybody have any like general questions about Linuxy stuff related to the mock?
Anything at all? Any particular system? Any questions on what was running, or how you could have done something better, or anything like that is fine. Okay.
If not, we'll hand it over to Jacob. Talk Windows.
Oh, that's okay. That's nice.
Yeah.
So the HTML just takes the last. That's interesting. Yeah.
Did you get any questions in the?
I did not get any specifically for those, but.
Okay. So yeah, I was just asked to come up here and talk about kind of how to secure you guys' remote systems. So for Windows, that was pretty simple. It was just RDP, I believe. There's really going to be 2 main ways for you to secure that. So once you're RDP'd in the box, if we pretend this is an RDP'd box, right? Specifically in remote desktop connection, you can actually specify options in there for who's allowed to connect to your system. So when we come in and do select users, so this way you could actually select it down to what users are supposed to be able to RDP in the box. And most commonly, those users also have to be a part of the remote desktop users group in Active Directory. So I don't know if this would have worked though. Did you give them like what users have to RDP in, or?
No, they weren't scored, so they could do anything.
Okay.
By default, we set this up to allow everyone.
Okay. So at the very least, Red Team likes to add backdoor to users. So at the very least, you could hard code who is supposed to be able to RDP, which would probably be any user that was in the domain before you notice Red Team users. So that would be one way to stop it. The main way, though, I would recommend doing it is through Windows Firewall. So once you're on that remote box, would be setting up a inbound role, and instead of doing it for a port, actually just do it for predefined and do it specifically for remote desktop. So this will only allow the remote desktop program to talk in, and then only allow the rules for TCP and UDP. Don't allow shadow in, because shadow is like essentially like VNC in the sense that they can like red team could like watch your session, right? And from there you can specify more things in the specific rule. So let me go ahead. So again, you can do the same thing as far as authorized users. You can also do exceptions here, which is almost a little better. And then, what's the other thing? Oh, so if you want to restrict it by your subnet as well, or at least I guess that wouldn't work for the scoring engine, would it?
Well, in this case, they weren't being scored. So
Oh, they weren't being scored on RDP. Okay, so if RDP wasn't the scored thing, so scored service, so you only needed to allow RDP for the purpose of you administering that box, maybe protecting a different service, right? Blocking it down by what IPs are allowed to RDP to it specifically, so it would be whatever box in your local network that you're RDPing from. That would be really, really smart, because then even if red team gets in and then enables RDP through some kind of nefarious way or anything else like that, you have this configured so it's not going to allow any connections from any IP addresses that you don't want it to connect from. So to be perfectly honest, the combination of setting up with some users and also locking it down via IP and the specific RDP program would have stopped everything I tried. So. What? Then you can go ahead and add them to the remote desktop users group, who's a part of that. I think they automatically get updated to that list, to be honest. What? You would have to, yeah. So those would conflict. So if you're going to restrict via IP, then you would have to turn that off and then only allow via user if you're going to want an outside user to connect, or you're going to have to know the subnet or the IP addresses they're going to come from, which with the scoring engine you won't know. But in the case of your remote network, worrying about the scoring engine's IPs and stuff like that wasn't a problem. So really all you had to worry about was maintaining your connection to the box for remote desktop. Other than that, everyone else doesn't need to remote desktop into your box. I guess, any questions as far as that goes? Okay. Any other questions, I guess, in general about Windows Defending from this last mock? Any problems you guys ran into? Okay. That's all I had then.
So that's all we have for this week. We're not going to have a meeting next week because of Thanksgiving, but we'll see you guys hopefully this Sunday and then in a couple weeks, where we will be opening up CCDC signups. So we're going to try to put together the team fairly soon. We're going to try to get an idea of who's interested in joining the CCDC team, and then we're going to do some qualifiers in January. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. And that will be the main CCDC team.
Yeah.
Like the only 8 people. So. Red Team will also be doing the mentoring program next semester as well. So we'll just be including ourselves on the sign-up sheet. So cool. There'll be a limited number though.